not loud enough? Good afternoon, Rotarians.
Good afternoon.
All right. Welcome to the September 12th meeting of the Rotary Club of Des Moines. I'm Kevin Kassir, your president for this year. Great to see a wonderful crowd. Dick Stopper, thanks for stepping up to the plate and being a greeter today. You can all sign up for that. So please be sure to take your turn and welcome guests and Rotarians to our meetings. We also have a sign up for our moment of inspiration, and I'm pleased to say we have Mr. Bob Vedrill, who's going to do our moment of inspiration, our Pledge of Allegiance, and four-way test. And then we'll have an opportunity to greet each other. So Bob, I'll welcome you to the podium.
May I ask that you all stand, please? Thank you. On the night of September 10th, 2001, 246 people went to sleep in preparation for their morning flights. 2,606 people went to sleep in preparation for work in the morning. 343 firefighters went to sleep in preparation for their next shift. 72 police officers went to sleep in preparation for morning patrol. 8 paramedics went to sleep for their morning shift of saving lives, and 1 canine went to bed a good walk. None of them saw past 10 a.m. the next morning of September 11th. 1,103 people have yet to be identified. The brave firefighters who scaled the stairs of the Twin Towers to save people, knowing that each step they took in that tragic environment potentially took them closer to their own death. The first firefighter was killed by someone who chose to jump rather than die a terrible death by fire and smoke. Others also made the same decision. In total, 2,977 people died in 9/11/2001. 2,753 in New York, 184 at the Pentagon, 40 on Flight 93 that crashed in Pennsylvania, whose brave passengers attempted to retake control of the plane. According to the World Trade Center Health Program, close to 80,000 individuals have been diagnosed with physical and mental health conditions brought on by exposure to the dust, smoke, and trauma of the 9/11 attacks. It was reported by the New York Fire Department in 2002, the number of those who died from ground zero illnesses was close to 370. Would you please join me in a moment of silence in memory of those who gave their lives on that fateful day? Thank you. And let us never, ever, ever forget. Please join me in a pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now a four-way test.
Is it true? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Now please greet your fellow Rotarians.
Welcome, Sam. Glad you could join us.
You're a new Rotarian, are you?
Yes, I am.
Welcome.
Great job. Thank you, Jordan.
How are you?
Have you back.
Yes, thank you. They said they were keeping my name tag, so
Absolutely.
I thought if you got my name tag, I better come back and use it.
Things been good?
Yeah, very good. So I was back downtown. We're doing the GIA Accelerator, Global Insurance Accelerator today down in the Papa John building. So it brought me right down the street, and I thought I'll come back and say hi to these lovely people.
Always
and,
welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
No problem.
All right, thank you for your friendly greetings. We have a number of guests today that I will introduce. When I introduce your name, please stand up and remain standing, and then we will recognize everybody all at once. So first up, we have Barbara Cortizio, the wife of our great John Cortizio. We have Mary Richards, guest of John Isles and a friend of today's speaker. We have Amy Christoph Brown with us today. Again, our speaker from a few weeks ago, the Dean of the Tippy College of Business. Welcome back. We have Scott Griffin, the Business Development Manager at Baxter Construction, guest of Christina Smith. And then we have Jim and Cynthia Kenyon, friends of the speaker. And Jim is actually a Cedar Falls Rotarian and a past president. So welcome, everybody. All right. We have another September birthday. Boy, we have a number of folks with welcome to the September birthday club. Steve Moraine. Steve, you here? Steve? Happy birthday. All right. It's another Did You Know segment, and this time I've got a story to tell again. So another historical story. Does anybody know who this man is?
Captain Gilmore.
Who said Tom Morris? Excellent. That's exactly right. Old Tom Morris. Yes. So here is the story of Old Tom Morris, and you see he has a golf club in his hand. So, Old Tom Morris was known as the grand old man of golf. He was born on June 16, 1821, in St. Andrews, Scotland, right along the North Sea, and steps from the St. Andrews Golf Course, the home of the Open, or formerly the British Open. Now, he was born to a family of weavers. So parents were weavers. That was the business that they had there. But nobody predicted that Thomas Mitchell Morris would have the impact on the game of golf that he did. Tom's dad was a golfer, and Tom was immediately drawn to the game at an early age and started out as a caddy on the old St. Andrews golf course. Tom couldn't get enough of golf, and he impressed the renowned golf professional there at St. Andrews, Alan Robertson, who hired him as an apprentice at the age of 20. Alan himself was just 26 years old, and they actually became best of friends. However, in 1858, they had a little falling out, and so Tom left and moved to Prestwick, Scotland, to be the head club pro there. In 1859, Alan tragically died, which impacted Tom. He came up with the idea to hold an open golf tournament, and they held their first open golf tournament in 1860 in honor of his mentor and his friend, Robertson. Only 8 players were entered in that first open, by the way. And in 1864, Tom was offered the golf professional job at St. Andrews Golf Course, so he went back home. His oldest son, Tommy, who also took up the game of golf, like his dad, took over as the pro at Prestwick. Old Tom then moved the British Open to St. Andrews. Old Tom lost that first Open, but won the tournament in 61, 62, 64, and 67. And then young Tom Morris would go on to win the tournament in 68, 69, 70, and 72. Today, I wonder what the grand old man of golf would be thinking of golf today. I think of Scotty Scheffler winning the FedEx Cup and the tournament there, collecting $25 million. And I think about the current fight between the PGA and LIV, and just wonder, what does he think of that game today? So there you go, particularly for the golfers, the story of old Tom Morris. And now we have Saltzgaber for Rotarians on the floor laughing. Doug?
Greetings, everyone. So, Skeet's been gone for 2 weeks and left me with some difficult things. Last week was Children's Charities. This week is a story about a tragic airliner. Not a lot to make fun of there, but I did get this from Skeet. He's taken up surfing out in Bermuda. Don't know how it fared there. But also I understand there was a football game last weekend. I've been told to be easy now, so I had the fortunate of watching the game with my great niece, and I asked her what her opinion was of the second half. So, I'll just leave that alone. A few weeks ago, we had an economist here, and I was already with some economic jokes, and then I was warned, do economists really have a sense of humor? Well, they're not here today, so I'm coming at it. There are 2 economists who were shipwrecked on a desert island. They had no money, but over the next 3 years, they made millions of dollars selling their hats back and forth. Did you hear about the economics graduate student who got injured by jumping into a pool in the winter? He forgot to seasonally adjust. And did you know that economists have predicted 9 out of the last 5 recessions? That's all I got.
All right, now welcome up past President John Cortizio to introduce our speaker today. John?
Thank you, President Kevin. It's my pleasure today to introduce to you Enfys McMurray, who is an author, who is a spellbinding teller of true stories that she has very meticulously researched. Enfys is a native of Wales. After being educated at the University of London and teaching there and in Wales, she emigrated to the United States. Here she received both her Bachelor of Science and MA degrees at Truman State University. Enfys resides in Croydon, and for 23 years she taught English, Spanish, world literature, and aesthetics and civilization at the Centerville campus of Indian Hills Community College. Enfys's first book, Hearst's Other Castle, dealt with a storied Hearst Castle off the coast of Wales. She later authored Centerville, a Mid-American saga, a fascinating history of an Iowa melting pot that became home to immigrants from more than 40 countries and happens to be my and Barbara's hometown. The events Enfys will speak about today are captured in her new book, Disaster at 39,000 Feet. This airliner catastrophe occurred in southern Iowa in May of 1962. This event is etched in my memory because I was just a few days from graduating at that time from the Iowa Law School. The remnants of this terrible disaster fell scattered in an area that ranged from a bit north of Centerville, Iowa, on south into Unionville, Missouri, which is about 22 miles south of Centerville. It's a story of immense tragedy and how small town in America acted, how small town America, it was more than one town and many country residents, how they acted heroically in the time of the most overwhelming crisis. Please give a very warm Rotary welcome to Amphis McMurray.
I'm a little short, so I'm putting it down. At 8:35, oops, okay, that's good, but then watch that I don't move around too.
We're good.
Okay. At 8:35 p.m. on the night of the 22nd of May, 1962, Continental Flight 11 was airborne from Chicago O'Hare Airport on a return flight to Los Angeles with a required stop in Kansas City, Missouri. Continental Flight 11 was a Boeing Golden Jet, one of the very first, and the captain was a man 51 years old, so trusted, so experienced, so loved, 51-year-old Freddie Gray. There were 45 people on board. That consisted of 37 passengers and a crew of 8. At 52 minutes past the hour, Chicago Ground Control and Air Flight followers said that Continental Flight 11 was flying at 39,000 feet, traveling west over Bradford, Illinois. As Continental Flight 11 crossed the Mississippi, Colonel Gray requested photographs so that he could see images of the storms that he knew he would run into over Iowa. So he was transferred to the 788 Radar Squadron Station at Waverly, just north of Waterloo. At exactly time 8 minutes later, he reported that he had successfully negotiated and evaded all the storms. He now requested that 788 Squadron begin to direct him to Kansas City operators. He said he was beginning to turn the plane to a 350 degree on the compass. He said, and I'm beginning to take a normal descent rate of 1,000 feet per 1 minute for 2 minutes and 7 seconds. At exactly 9:17, he was referred to the station at Kansas City. Kansas City radar could see an indistinct shape and one that was fading. The Waverly operator saw the transponder come back, and he shouted, "Flight 11, Flight 11. He turned to the young airman that was helping him with the transmitters and said, "He's gone. He's just plain gone." Continental Flight 11 had disappeared. There was no trace. There was no communication. Immediately, the FAA, the FBI, and Continental Airlines are alerted. The only guide they had to go on as to exactly where was Continental Flight 11 were the last readings that Waverly had received from Captain Gray. And that was that the plane was at Airways J45V and Airways 64B. They knew he was 10 miles away from there, and they knew he was traveling south. The only conclusion that they could triangulate the information of all the authorities now searching for him was that this plane was somewhere, in quotes, in the vicinity of Centerville, Iowa. There was no news of news breaking in this story yet in Centerville. It was 9:30 at night. People were going to bed, getting ready for the next day. Leo Craver, a businessman in Centerville, was driving north on Highway 5 from Unionville, Missouri, when he saw a large piece of metal in the middle of the road right at the X-line turnoff. Leo got out of the car. Other people were driving around it. He picked it up and looked at it. It was about 3 foot and about 6 inches wide, and it was gray on one side, green on the other. I said to Leo, "How did you know it was from an aircraft?" Well, he, Leo, was a Second World War veteran of the Army Air Force. He knew an aircraft piece when he saw it, and he said, "I felt the rivets. It's the rivets that indicated to me it was from something that was to do with aircraft." He took the piece to the sheriff of Appaloosa County. Paul Thomas knew the reputation of Leo Craver. He said, "Take me back to where you found it." When they got back in the dark, dozens of people were out with flashlights, picking up pieces of paper napkins, picking up pieces of plastic cups, knives, and forks. Still, there was no news until a highway patrol officer finds a piece of plywood at the side of the road, hands it to Leo, and Leo finds a card just tucked into the side. And it said Continental Airlines Flight 11, Chicago to Kansas City. There was a name and there was a seat number. The highway patrol officer, now that had joined the group, called head office up here in Des Moines. And now the news was breaking across the country that a major jet, luxury passenger airliner that was also known on that flight from Chicago to Kansas City that time of night as the Champagne flight. And they said it was missing somewhere in Centerville. At least 700 people turned out of their beds in Centerville. All they had to go on was to follow a southwesterly track of airplane disaster, pieces of debris. There was blood on sandwiches. There was blood on blankets with a signia of Continental's eagle in the corner. There was a door, and the door said to be opened and shut on takeoff and landing. There was a pulley. All people did was follow the southwestern track. Charlie DePue, the managing editor of the newspaper, already exhausted because the editor and publisher was away on a vacation, and he turned out with a notebook and he was taking notes of every step. Also among the people who turned out was Dr. Ritter, Dr. Eugene Ritter, who had a sterling Second World War reputation. He'd grown up on the border of Iowa and Missouri, so he was a local boy. He'd gone to the University of Iowa. He'd graduated from their medical school. He was a surgeon, and in the Second World War, he had been performing emergency surgeries under palm trees in the Pacific Islands. Became one of the lead surgeons of the biggest military hospital outside the continental US. And he was assisted, by the way, in his surgeries by a Hollywood star that happened to be a conscientious objector, Lou Ayres. If you watch Turner Classic Movies, you'll find that Lou Ayres was the original Dr. Kildare, not when it went onto television, but in the movies. And Lou Ayres had said, "I object to war. I will go to the battlefields, but I will not carry a gun and be part of the killing." So these people were now heading south. They didn't know where they were going. They were simply following this trail. And remember, it was dark now, pitch dark. They walk and they walk, and by this time ambulances are coming, fire trucks, police stations, all of them making for the Missouri border. They didn't even know some of them, they'd crossed into Missouri. But that southwesterly trail took them 3 miles across the border to a large alfalfa field that's about 6 miles northwest of Unionville, the county town of Putnam County. They eventually found it about 2:45 in the morning. And it's the Iowa people that got there first. So here's Doc Ritter. And when they find the aircraft, the tail is missing, the left wing has gone, all 4 engines have gone. And Al Clark, who ran the fire rescue truck, says to me, we turned the headlights into the tail section so that Doc Ritter could go in. Doc Ritter found everyone on board dead except one. Takahito Nakano had survived, this 27-year-old brilliant engineer. So immediately Doc Ritter ordered the Centerville ambulance to take him up to Centerville Hospital. At that moment, Dr. Judd from Unionville, Missouri had turned up with the sheriff of Putnam County. And Dr. Judd said, where are these bodies going? If you take them across the border, you're in trouble. Ritter, who didn't put up with anybody very lightly, he said, you've only just got here. We got a morgue ready in Centerville. I've already ordered the National Guard to put that in place. So the sheriff, David Fowler, steps forward and says, move them and I'll shoot your tires out. This was the beginning of a lot of tension between Missouri and the state of Iowa. Now it's first light. And with first light, the main investigators start arriving. Number 1 was the head of the FAA, Najib Halaby, just appointed by President Kennedy, and horrified as to how he finds the pilots up at the front. Najib Halaby's daughter, by the way, is Queen Noor of Jordan. Who else turns up? The head of the FBI in Kansas City was Mark Felt. You know him better in 10 years' time as Deep Throat. All these people are turning up, and I said to Dr. Judd, how did you solve that the bodies were to stay in Missouri? He said, I contacted the Attorney General of Missouri. I said, who was it? Thomas Eagleton. And many of you will remember he was forced to resign because he did psychiatric for depression. If you read his biography, it was a life full of depression that he was suffering. So all this collection of people are now arriving, including Bob Six, who was asleep in bed in Paris, France, when he receives the news from the Continental executives. He flies back to the US, lands in Centerville on a little grass strip, but he was on his 3rd wife, which you'll be interested in. The wife he was then currently married to was Audrey Meadows of the famous Honeymooners, and the wife number 2 before that was Ethel Merman. So this collection of people with reputations that are known outside aircraft. So what happens about the aircraft? With first light, they also find out a report from the sheriff of Davis County saying, we've got tremendous damage here. I've picked up bloody clothes by Lake Wapello in Davis County. And there is a trail, not just from Centerville going southwest. The trail is 40 miles long, from Lake Wapello in Davis County all the way to the crash site. At noon, the A-team arrives by helicopter into the field. This is the Civil Aeronautics Board and a group known as the Accident Investigation Team. At their head, George Van Epps. George Van Epps was the world authority on every aspect of 707s. He arrives and takes charge, The scene is always now back in Centerville because that's the obvious place for the hotel and the people around the square in Centerville release their businesses so that incoming journalists, businessmen, anybody that needed to do anything to cover the story, they released the town to those incoming people. And George Van Epps and the lead team and some of the FBI team are staying in the Continental Hotel on the east side. So here now, the story begins, their research begins. First of all, they find the flight recorder. It was shaped like a football and it was in one of the wheels. It shipped immediately to Washington, D.C. for analysis. And then in comes, at George Van Epps' order, the top experts on every single facet to do with 707 aircraft, the metal, the hydraulics, the engineering, the fuel of every aspect. They find the 4 engines. By the way, engines go on their own trajectory if there is anything happening with an aircraft crashing. They're 1 mile to 1.5 miles in another field. And all the local people turning out, assisting and helping and giving and putting people up in their homes, everything they could do. This big search was for the tail section. They knew that was critical. The tail section was not found for 3 days, quite late at night. And when it was found, it becomes a critical part of the evidence. FBI agents were literally crawling all over the floor, over the field, to pick up every detail they could pick up to give evidence. And that whole field becomes enormous, and then they find the tail section is in 500 flat pieces, hundreds and thousands of smaller bits, but those 500 pieces are tipped and fallen in Iowa, and they bring it up to Centerville. They set it up, all those 500 people, and with chicken wire and laths of wood, it is recreated on a large building at the fairgrounds in Centerville. Piece by piece is put into place with paste, with everything they could do, and from Seattle come top Boeing engineers with a pile of instructions of how to put a 707 together 4 foot off the floor. When eventually it is put together, the press are allowed in and they find the clear evidence of what had brought down this flight. A 220-inch hole just a few feet from the very tip of the tail, giving evidence that whatever happened in the right rear lavatory. And Mark felt still some pieces needed. He describes in his book, "There I was," he said, "suspended on a chair with no arms, from a helicopter with no door, and flying the 40 miles all the way from the crash site to Lake Wapello. And as he flew, he knew exactly what he was looking for. People were out searching anyway, but he knew the individual pieces would point, and these pieces would be collected by young recruits and all shipped into Centerville and reassembled onto that tail section. Across the road from the building on that square where that was being recreated, another startling event was happening. Already they knew that 7 people had fallen out of the tail section. They were found 24 hours later, spread right across distances between each one of them. But you see, there was an 8th, and they didn't find her, Joyce Rush, one of the flight attendants. They didn't find her for another 2 days. And high school kids from all over that area, some of them chose to hold hands. Some were told the girls couldn't go. And they held hands and walked right across that part of where the possibility could be that this girl lay. They found her. And she was shipped immediately to the morgue that Dr. Judd had to set up in a hurry in Unionville. And Dr. Judd looks at the remains of Joyce Rush and he says, I don't like that mark on her arm. At the same time, and the US top pathologists are doing all the examinations, Dr. Judd kept on, I don't like that mark on her arm. At the same time, across the road in Centerville Square, to where the FBI now were having conferences every single night, we know that newspapermen witnessed some FBI agents going into the room where it was going to be held, one of them holding in his hand, in a plastic bag, pieces of metal. Others were holding a piece of yellow tubing, and one of them was holding a card. And the card was browny beige in color, and 2 letters, quite a small piece of card, torn away from us somewhere. The letter D and possibly the letter A. We know now that when Joyce Rush's body was shipped down to her home to be buried, US pathologists went again. They examined her body with x-rays and found she had metal bits in her body. And furthermore, they remembered Dr. Judd's concern about the mark on her arm. And they pulled out from that mark on the arm another card, browny beige in color, with 1 letter D on it. Now, to the FBI, they were all looking at each other. One of them was saying, the smell, fireworks. Those were all signals that they knew dynamite was involved, and that all rumors that Captain Gray had brought the plane down because of storms was rubbish. They knew now there was more investigation, and at this point the investigation moves to Kansas City. Already the FBI have got their eye on victim that was sitting in the seat number 9. His name was Thomas Jean Doty, 34 years old. They already were suspicious of him because of the amount of insurance he'd taken out. $75,000 just for that one trip from Chicago to Kansas City. But a couple of weeks before, he'd taken out $50,000. And the day before the flight, he'd taken out $225,000. That's a total amount of $350,000, which was going to go to his wife, Naomi. 45 FBI agents are searching Kansas City all over. They're finding out his medical record. He was a severe diabetic. His parents were Christian Scientists, which means perhaps science wasn't their major focus on him. He was supposed to be charming, highly intelligent, an honors student from the University of Missouri. But something went wrong. All we know is there was a change in his personality. And at one stage he was arrested late at night. The FBI had those fingerprints. And what they found was, when he was arrested, he said he had snatched a woman's purse, according to the woman, who was so drunk. The FBI sent me 800 pages. And she was so drunk that she couldn't even identify Doty. But he said, look, I'm ill all the time, because he wasn't handling his diabetes properly. So he said, I thought I needed to vomit, and I walked away, and I was vomiting, and I found this purse just lying on the ground. Thomas Doty, of course, had died on the flight. Everybody had died except Takehito Nakano, and he dies at 6:45 the next morning because of internal injuries. After the arrest, Tom Doty had said to his wife, I'm so sorry this has all happened, and she began to cry. They had one child at 5 years old, and she was 7 months pregnant on the next child. And she said, don't you realize what kids are like? They're all going to know this story. And he answered, and the FBI report that was sent to me was redacted. So I didn't quite know what he had told her. That's blanked out. But when the full FBI report is announced, her full report is given. And that is that Dodie said to her, "Don't worry, I won't let that happen to our little girl. I'll do something to end my life, and it won't arouse any suspicions." When the Civil Aeronautics Board report came out in its final version, it said the clear evidence was dynamite that was found at the right rear restroom. Some 8 years later, a British-Canadian writer by the name of Arthur Haley produces a book called Airport. And there were several movies that came from that book as well. And that book, we know now that Arthur Haley studied this story in huge depth. But of course, his bomber in the right rear restroom died, and the rest of the people survived. Now, I'd like to tell you that's the end of what went on in Appaloosa County. But at the same time, Gano Smith had committed, exactly the same time, Gano Smith had murdered 5 people at Martinsburg, just north of Ottumwa. Actually, there was a 6th that had been murdered. And we know that Gano Smith had got away from the scene of the crime and ran out of gasoline at Udell in Appaloosa County. So all these people, the police, the sheriff, and all his teams, already exhausted, they hadn't slept properly, they're now having to deal with Gano Smith. He arrived in Appaloosa County, and of course immediately the scare was his gun that he had used to kill these 5 people in his family, the Macbeth family. And what they found was that gun, known as the over-under gun, and I hope I get these numbers straight, a .410 shotgun and a .22 caliber rifle. Did I get that right? I don't know guns, so that. Now then, that's been missing the whole time. Even down there now, there's a whole group of people getting together to get a backhoe and to start digging around to try and find it all this time later. Gano Smith hid out in that rural, beautiful area for 3 days and 3 nights, absolutely terrorizing everybody. And when eventually he was caught, and he must have walked 15 miles, the actual day he was caught number 3, he was caught in a barn right by Lake Wapello in Davis County. So if you find the barn, look straight up in the air, 39,000 feet is where that bomb went off. Now you may think, whoa, all these little coincidences and people, well, there's yet another one. Najib Halabi, I told you, was the head of the FAA. His daughter, Queen Noor of Jordan, actually Dowager Queen Noor, because King Hussein, her husband, died, she is now president of the United World College Movement. The very first campus that they used was St. Donat's Castle that you heard John say that was my first book. Hearst's other castle. This 12th century, Hearst was nuts about things that were terribly old like that. It's the only time he owned a real 12th century castle. My father was the electrical engineer who made the electrical attachments so that Hearst could add, when he found 3 bathrooms there, this is in the 1930s, when he found 3 bathrooms there, he added 57, and he moved block by block pieces of other ancient buildings, all of which actually were falling down, but the Brits don't like to tell you that. They were all going down. This magnificent priory barn, 13th century priory barn, that Hearst moved to that castle, and literally, he didn't drop it, but you can imagine between the inner castle wall and the outer castle wall, it was rebuilt between those two. Well, I wrote to Queen Noor hoping she would put a little bit of bump on the back of the book, I wrote twice. She didn't reply at the time, but she's given herself away. Because in my letters to her, I said, congratulations on being president of this wonderful organization. But if you don't know anything about it, kids of every nationality and race from all over the world are in the same classroom with each other to discuss everything. Their very first campus was St. Donat's Castle in Wales. And I wrote in the letter to her, I said, had it not been for William Randolph Hearst, even though he was regarded as absolutely terrible things that he was doing to these old British buildings. In fact, when I wrote that book, they were rude to me. They would say, what in the world are you interested in that dreadful man for? Because they knew nothing about him. But that was a reputation Hearst had. But guess what? Within the last couple of weeks, I have received an email from St. Donat's Castle. And St. Donat's Castle says, we understand that William Randolph Hearst prepared this castle so that the United World College Movement's first campus could move here. All those bathrooms and this huge assembly room known as the Bradenstoke Hall. Well, I'm afraid I had to giggle because she didn't reply to me, but she sure told them at Atlantic College, which is the name of the campus, right? And my book, Hearst on the Castle, was a little Welsh publisher. I think he only produced a small amount. I couldn't believe it. A couple of years ago, it's being offered for $700 each. Now it's down to $70 if you go on to Amazon. It's down to $70, and one place it says, we're prepared to give it you half price for $35. Now, this is my original book. And all of a sudden, that book is gold in my hand. I've been invited to go to the castle with my beautiful friends here. Are going to be with me on that day, October the 4th. I fly out of here on October the 1st, and I'll be back October the 10th. But they've invited me to the castle. My guests are coming too. I said, can I show them all Hearst? Oh my goodness, they said, where did you get all those sources and the pictures in that book? Well, see, I know, and I'm holding on to that till I get there. So all I can say is one event after another, and then they said, and would you be prepared to speak to the American students that are here? Oh, damn, will I love that.
Memphis, thank you so much. It's so wonderful. Will you be able to stay if folks have some questions to be able to
Absolutely.
meet them? Okay, great. All right, so upcoming meetings. We have Robert Warren, the Hoyt Sherman CEO, will be with us next week. I'll talk about the events of the following week shortly. And then Monty Shaw, the Executive Director of the Iowa Renewable Fuels Association, will be speaking to us on October 3rd. And now to upcoming events. So we don't meet on September 26th. The Embassy Club is unavailable, but there are two opportunities to get together as we have shared in previous meetings. On Tuesday the 24th, the Des Moines Multi-Club event, which is putting on another discussion about the topic of putting an end to human trafficking. And then on the 26th, we have our Thank Fall event. And this is going to be a great evening. It's our second annual, in fact. It's at the Jester Park Nature Center in Granger. A beautiful setting. If you haven't been there or you weren't with us last year, you need to be there. It's 5 to 7 p.m. on the 26th. It's family friendly, so we're welcoming all family members. It's going to be a phenomenal barbecue, delicious from Watch Smokin' Barbecue. We've got music by Dan Medeiros. We'll have beer, wine, desserts, all included. Big thank you to our generous anonymous sponsor to make the evening possible for just $25 per adult and $12, I think, for children. Deadline, though, is today. So you got to get back to Kitty by 3 o'clock today so we can get the final quantity to What You Smokin'. and the board will actually be serving you. So we're gonna treat you well. Come join us, it's a great time to get together. And then we have on September 17th, we have the next morning fuel. And we're gonna highlighting another great Rotarian from our club, Lynette Rasmussen. Lynette was a previous CEO and now is the Chief Culture and Community Officer of the Rasmussen Group. And they own 11 different companies. So it's gonna be fantastic to learn from Lynette, hear about her history, hear about her company, RSVP with Kitty for that. Flyers are on the tables for all these events to check those out. And lastly, again, thank you to Emphas, Bob, thank you. We appreciate all the support. Guests, welcome. Glad to have you, and all the Rotarians here, welcome. Please think about these 3 strategic pillars of ours: relationship building, membership growth, and making community impact. There's a lot of opportunities we're putting in front of you to participate on those. The Thank Fall event, a great opportunity to build relationships. Deanne Thompson is going to be holding a international service committee meeting right after this meeting, so participate there. Or just simply take the ball in your hands, and when you run into somebody, ask them if they know about Rotary and see if they'd like to come to a meeting. You can also bring them to Fuel for coffee on the 17th. Lots of opportunities to introduce people to Rotary. Thank you all. Thank you, friends. We are adjourned.